Hello. Based on our previous promise, today I am going to explain Microeconomics Chapter 1. This microeconomics is somewhat advanced microeconomics, so it is good for MSc students as well as for professionals in the first degree too. The first one is basic concepts of microeconomics. As you know, microeconomics is the study of the economy as a whole. Such includes business cycle, determinants of inflation or what determines inflation, to increase or to decrease, determinants of unemployment, what factor can increase unemployment rate or decrease unemployment rates, long run growth, what kind of factor behind the long run growth, and the effect of government fiscal in the monetary policy. The goal is to explain the economic changes that affect households, farmers, and the markets. What kind of factor can affect the households, the farmers, such as producer, and the market conditions? Why study microeconomics? We study microeconomics in order to understand what determines the income of individual as well as income of the business, the effect of government policy on income. For example, if tax rate increase, what is the impact on individual income? Is that increase or decrease or business income because of taxing policy? Or when a monetary policy do some policies such as, for example, increasing of money in circulation or increasing of the interest rates, what is the outcome on income of business in the individual because of that, in the performances and the consequence of an economy, and also to answer the question of why is the average income high in some countries. For example, in developed country, GDP per capita or income per population is increased, and the low in other countries, that is in developing country, for example. What is the reason behind? Why do prices rise rapidly in some time periods? For example, price of crop, food products increase when there is no suppliers or shortage of suppliers, while they are more stable than others. For example, harvesting time it is stable or totally it is decreased. Why do production and the employment expand in some years and contract in others? And the like are answered by microeconomics. First, microeconomists' principal task is to try to figure out why overall economic activity changes. As you know, microeconomics studies about economy at aggregates in total, not in separate ways, where measures like total value of all production or employment rate are higher in some years than in others. Second, microeconomics also try to understand what determines the level and the rate of change overall price, or this is inflation. Why does microeconomics matter? There are at least three reasons why microeconomics matter. The first one is cultural literacy, self-interest, and the civic responsibilities. How cultural literacy, how self-interest is matter. How civic responsibilities a matter for microeconomics. Let me discuss it in the following ways. Cultural literacy. Microeconomics is as a matter of cultural literacy. Modern industrial economy has delivered increase in material prosperity and the living standards that no previous generation ever saw it. This increasing material prosperity means that the economy has a cultural silence today that it did not have in previous century. How self-interest is a microeconomic matter. The more important reason to care about microeconomics is that microeconomics matter to you personally. For instance, farmers and the bakeries are interested in the price of wheat because farmers need the price of wheat should increase and the bakery needs the price of the inputs should be low. That means price of the wheat low. Whereas economics professors are very interested in price of economics professor, that is wage. He wanted to increase its wage. He's interested to increase the professor's salary, that is self-interest. What happens to those individual markets for weights and for economic professor is that to shape the lives of farmers, if the price of the weights increase, the life of the farmer is shaped, the life of the baker is shaped, or it can be shapy if the price of the input is decreased and the output price is also decreased somewhat. Then if price decrease, the demand increase, as we know from the law of demand. For the bakery, there is a demand, so the life is shapy. Economic professor too, when the wage is increased for professor, his life is shaped, as you know. An expanding economy will make real income rise, whereas deep recession will increase unemployment. As you know, if there is expansion, there is income. That expansion means if there is a demand and if economy is somewhat expand or increased, the income is increased. There is a job outside and the income is increased. The opportunity of job is increased, and so that the income is raised. Whereas deep recession will increase unemployment. When there is a recession where there is no demand, that means if there is no demand, the supply also decrease. And because of that, if there is no demand or if there is a recession, there is a layoff for workers and also any employer might not be employed, will not employ. Increase unemployment and make those who lost their jobs have hard time finding other jobs. This is related with actual and potential production or GDP that we are going to see in the future, or you may you might have such information before. So the bargaining power of employer and that of employees depend on the phase of the business cycle. As you know, a business cycle can determine the job opportunity. Business cycle also determine the price of the production. Inflation is determined also by business cycle. For example, if business cycle increased, production increased, that means inflation is high, the price of the product, that means demand is very high, the output is also high, unemployment rate is low, or employed, there is opportunity of the job. To some extent, it is not for a long period of time. But according to the Phillips curve, if inflation increase, unemployment rate decrease, that is opposite. Or also there is Occam's law. So it is in a short period of time, it can be, but in a long run, that may not be working. Sorry. Then next one is civic responsibility. An important reason to care about microeconomics is that by working together, we can improve microeconomic performance. The whole is greater than the sum. If we go together or if we work together, we will be productive. The right to vote is one of the most precious rights human beings have ever had. In electing our government, we indirectly make microeconomic policy. There are two basic methods of stating microeconomic construction of the theory or in models or by determination of the equilibrium. Historical perspective for microeconomics. Microeconomics is originated from classical economists, most of which were from Britain and some from France, and the other part of the European country. Before the coming of Keynesians, microeconomics consists of primarily the theory of output and the theory of employment. With the coming of Keynesian, microeconomics turned any branch. He took the classical economists to tasks. Keynes replaced the concept with his own brought in the new concept of microeconomics. The 20th century developments in microeconomics. Evolution or revolutions. Blanchard 2000 argues that history of microeconomics in the 20th century appear as series of battles, revolutions, and the counter-revolutions. From the Keynesian revolution of 1930s and the 1940s to the battle between monetarists, such as monetarists, as you know, is Friedman. Milton Friedman is a monetarist, and he stated the solution central banks or the monetary policy said. And the Keynesians, as you know, stated about the government is a solution for 1930s financial crisis, as you know, 1930, 28, 30s, 1950s and the 1960s, to rational expectation revolution of 1970s, battle between new Keynesians and the classical of 1980s. In surveying the developments of microeconomics over the course of the 20th century, Blanchard identifies three epochs, namely pre-1940s, an epoch of exploration, 1940 to 80 of consolidation time, in the post-1980 of new epoch exploration. According to Blanchard, among the steady accumulation of knowledge that took place over the period, it is possible to identify a number of examples which includes improvements in availability of economic data in developing system of national accounts. There is availability of the data. The development of improvements in econometric methods in more detailed modeling of the behavioral relationship of variables